Welcome into Hardcore Penn State Football. Penn State set to take on Boise State in the Fiesta Bowl in the quarterfinals of the college football playoff. This is the official preview episode here at Hardcore Penn State Football. Penn State also lands another commit in the transfer portal, this time at the wide receiver position. We'll get to all of that, preview of Boise State, and our predictions in this episode. If you haven't already, please make sure to like the video and subscribe wherever you're listening. Welcome into Hardcore Penn State Football. I'm Cory Lestochi. With me, as always, the great Shawn Kane. How you doing today, Shawn?
Good, Cory. Had a nice Christmas. Get ready to get into this review of the Pitt-Toledo game.
Merry Christmas, Shawn Kane. You got a little shout out here to both of us from way back on YouTube saying shout out for making content the day after Christmas. Which, Shawn, you and I both worked today. So it wasn't really not to not pat ourselves on the back, but it wasn't like anything but business as usual, really, as far as our day's gone.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like having a Sunday in the middle of the week. I was able to actually got Christmas Eve off as well. So
nice.
I guess it was kind of like having a weekend in the middle of the week because all of a sudden tomorrow's Friday.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. And then we get a weekend. I mean, it's kind of strange. It's the weird point of the year right now, too, where there's no Penn State football on Saturday anymore. So,
yeah,
because we're all during the week now.
Don't get me started on that. Also, I'm going to do my best to hide whatever the hell happened to me. But for those that are watching live on YouTube, you can see that I am dying of some affliction. If any of you are dermatologists out there and want to tell me what's happening to me, you can DM us later. But
or you got to fight.
I don't literally no idea what happened. I want to say it had something to do with the cold weather on Saturday. I got really bad windburn, like across my forehead in general. I don't know if it was the hat that I wore because it's a hat that I don't usually wear. I don't know, Shawn, but I am this might be my last episode.
You would think though, if it was your hat, it would be your whole forehead that got affected, not just like a little part of your head.
I could not tell you what's going on with me. I don't think I hit it anywhere. But anyway, I just so everyone's aware, I wanted to make sure that you guys didn't have to see this the entire time. So I rearranged my entire setup last second here. That's why we're a little bit late to start. Just so when I look at my other monitor, you guys don't have to look at that hideous looking thing on the side of my head. So you're welcome for that. Dorito Bandit on YouTube says, well, hey guys, been a while since I hopped on live. Well, thank you, Dorito Bandit, for hopping on live. If you haven't already, please make sure to like the video. If you're watching live on YouTube, Sam Kim on YouTube says confidence level 1 to 10 against Boise State this week. Most fans are 8 or 9, and do they cover despite a backdoor score? So the spread right now is right around 11.5, 10.5. We will get to our predictions at the end of the show. But Shawn, don't give us away your prediction, but tell us how confident you are in your prediction.
As far as the final result, probably about an 8 or a 9. As far as the spread, I mean, it's so hard to say. Like, is Penn State gonna cover? Is Boise gonna cover? I mean, I don't know who I'm picking, but that's a little harder to say. But I feel pretty good about what my final prediction would be.
I'm 10 out of 10 on both.
Okay.
So take that for what you will. Thanks, Sam Kim, for being here.
Keep in mind, though, the only thing I'm 10 out of 10 about, I'm not 10 out of 10 about many things in life. Like, I'm 10 out of 10 that someday I'll die. But, that's about it.
You know what's weird to me? If you ever go to ESPN, Penn State, homepage for football, they have a little segment at the top that says postseason, has SMU and it has Boise State. But I think it considers Oregon part of the regular season.
That is strange. I mean, there are weird things with that, like what counts as like I know Tyler Warren was able to get the Big Ten record for receiving yards, but he did it in the Big Ten championship game. So I think it's kind of murky what counts as postseason and regular season.
Yeah. We are also a little bit late because we were both watching the end of the Game Above Bowl. Is that what it is? Above Game Bowl, whatever the hell the name. We talked about
I think
this
it's
last
Game
time.
Above, yeah, something
Game Above,
like that.
where Pitt lost to
Pitt was
Toledo.
below.
So in 6 overtime. So that was fun to watch. Dorito Bandit says plot twist. Grunk comes in at the end to cover, just like Bo. So there you go. All right, Shawn, before we get into the preview of Boise State, actually, I'm going to just be honest with you, not a completely jam-packed show tonight. We got one thing to talk about, and then we got a preview Boise State, and we got a prediction. So this might be, I know it's not, you're probably going to get into like a rabbit hole now, and it's going to be like the longest show ever. But for our standards, it would probably potentially be a shorter show today. Probably a normal length show for probably everybody else. But we actually have some airspace here. So might be taking some questions from YouTube as they come in. So it's a good episode to be live in. But first thing we got to talk about is Penn State's latest transfer get from Troy, of all places. And that is a former Troy wide receiver, Devontae Ross, who committed to Penn State this past week. Shawn, you know what? I'm not even going to lead into anything. I'm just going to say that in his career at Troy, or this last year at Troy, just in 2024, 76 catches, 1,000 yards, 13.7 yards per carry, and 11 touchdowns. With that knowledge, I will turn it over to you. Tell us about Penn State's latest commitment transfer portal wide receiver, Devontae Ross.
Yeah, kind of a good compliment to Kyron Hudson in that Ross is going to bring more speed. He also is able to give you a little bit more in, I think the punt return battle is going to be pretty heated during the summer between him and Zion Tracy, because Ross showed an ability to return punts as well. He had a total of 3 touchdowns against Iowa this season too. In case you're wondering how he's going to translate to Big Ten play, I mean, that's certainly an encouraging sign. It's always, I mean, that's always something you have to keep in the back of your head when you see a guy transitioning to the Big Ten from a lower conference. But you know, I'm happy that he was able to show up then. It's just about, you know, next year it'll be just about handling the grind of the Big Ten. I believe he'll translate as a slot guy, and I anticipate Harrison Wallace will be back. I don't know that for sure, but I anticipate he will be. But then everybody else kind of questionable. I'm not sure what happens with Caden Saunders. I'm not sure what happens with Liam Clifford. I'm not even sure what happens with Omari Evans, because him and Omari Evans do a lot of the same thing. Now,
yeah, before we get too far down that road, because I think that's another conversation. But Devontae Ross, I mean, he's a straight up burner, right? Like, we're talking about a guy who is going to stretch the defense, is electric in the punt return game, straight up speed. He plays on the outside right now, but I kind of agree with you, Shawn. Probably going to move inside at the next level. People have already started the KJ Hamler comparisons. He's actually heavier than KJ Hamler, which I think is kind of or maybe I got that backwards. He's actually slightly taller than KJ Hamler, but he's actually lighter than KJ Hamler, which I thought was kind of interesting. But he's going to get those comparisons as kind of a catch the ball and look out kind of guy, which is, like you mentioned, not exactly like what Kyron Hudson is. Want to get to what's going to eventually pop up here on YouTube and has already popped up on Twitter a couple times, is a guy coming from a smaller school, and he's automatically getting labeled Dante Cephas. I don't know what the production is going to be like, Shawn, but I am very, very confident that Dante Cephas and Devontae Ross are not comparable at all from a style of how they play wide receiver. Dante Cephas was a possession guy. He was I will try to beat you on slant routes, and you can trust me over the middle. At least that's what he did at Kent State. Devontae Ross is the opposite of a possession guy. He is a burner, high yards per carry. He actually has like a 12% drop rate if we're going to get nervous about some things. But he is a home run hitting kind of guy. So I don't know what that's going to mean as far as production at Penn State. But if you're worried about him being a Dante Cephas, you don't need to be as far as the traits they possess. We'll see what happens when it comes to the production.
And I think as far as Cephas goes, there's a world that exists that would have worked out. And the reason I say that is if he just knew the playbook, and I think he'd be fine. I don't think he would have been a superstar or anything for us last year, but I think he would have been fine. I think he would have been kind of like, now he had a bigger role than Fleming did, but kind of like in that role. Move the chains, and I think could have really helped last year. So yeah, like you said, the two diametrically opposed styles.
Right.
But the thing is, guys, speed is speed. And speed works.
Put that on a shirt.
Yeah, speed is speed. I mean, it's going to work in the NFL. It's going to work in college. It's going to work in high school. It's going to work at any level of college. Because a 4.3 speed or 4.4 speed, that's fast anywhere. So, and that will translate. It's just everything else that's still, a question mark. And it's fair to say, fair to speculate how he will translate. But yeah, Cephas comparisons are a tad lazy, because the only thing they really have in common is they're coming from a lower level.
Right. Dorito Bandit says
what conference is Troy? USA?
Sunbelt.
Sunbelt. Okay.
Don't quote me on that.
Yeah.
Sunbelt.
There you go.
Tim Ray says home run threat is what every talking head has said that Penn State needs. Yeah, so there you go. We're just another bunch of group of talking heads here. I want to get back to maybe what that position group looks like. You mentioned Liam Clifford, Amari Evans. I really think, I don't see any world where Clifford leaves. I think he's just as ingrained in Penn State. He probably likes Penn State even more than Bo Prabula does. I also don't think – I think Amari Evans could go somewhere and somebody would take a chance at him in a power 4 level. I don't know if that happens with Clifford. I know Clifford is really good at high school. Just don't – I think if you're going to take a bet on a guy in the portal, you're willing to take that bet on the guy if he has speed. It's harder, in my opinion, to take chances on guys that you're just hoping kind of figures it all out. So in my opinion, Amari Evans has a huge upside in the portal versus Liam Clifford. I just don't see Liam Clifford necessarily going anywhere. I don't know. I mean, we talked about Amari Evans a week ago before the playoffs started, how Amari Evans, if he decides to enter the portal, which Penn State has now taken 2 guys, so I wouldn't necessarily blame him. If he decides to enter the portal at the end of this run, he has a lot of opportunity from now until then to really increase his stock. So it could be a win-win situation where Amari Evans can show out against a Boise State pass secondary that's suspect. Well, no matter what happens after that, he might have given himself a real opportunity to go make some money somewhere else. So be curious what happens with him. But I don't think Penn State is going into this saying we're expecting to kick any of you guys out. But I do think they're expecting some natural attrition to occur.
Yeah, I think so too, especially in today's day and age. You're able to take more flyers on a guy because not that the receiver, believe me, next year the receiver position's far from settled, but there are a lot of guys there, right? We talked about the guys that play, but Tyzer Denmark is still there, Peter Gonzalez is still there, Anthony Ivy is still there. So there are a lot of guys, not to mention the freshmen. We have a bunch of freshmen coming in. Josiah Brown, who didn't play this year. So there are a lot of receivers. So yes, when you bring a guy like this in, when you bring two receivers into an already body-wise crowded room, you're anticipating some guys are going to move on to other places. And I think that will happen. I mean, it's kind of hard to speculate who it's going to be. Like who's going to leave. I do think Omari Evans and I think both these guys could exist. But they both do very, very similar things. So Omari may not be thrilled with it, but I could also say Kyron Hudson and Harrison Wallace do very similar things.
That's true. That's a very good point, Shawn.
So there are similarities between those four guys, and they may be the top four guys we roll with next year in an ideal world.
Shawn, I need to excuse myself for 1 second. Answer this fan question while I go check on something real quick. This is from Tim Ray asking why we haven't seen more of Tyseer Denmark. I'll be right back.
Yeah. I mean, I think with Tyseer Denmark, I think when you come to college, and some guys have to adjust to this, I think he's probably from a player perspective ready. But I think it's when you factor in having to learn the playbook, you factor in adjusting to college life. I think the whole package, I don't know if he was quite ready yet. That's honestly kind of speculation on my part. But I do know when he gets in, he looks, albeit it's been limited time, he looks ready from a player from playing perspective. So that's sort of my speculation on that. And you also have to keep in mind, like, he didn't get here last winter. He came a little bit later in the summer. So when you just put the whole thing together, it kind of makes sense, especially knowing James Franklin. James Franklin's the same guy that started Koa Farmer over Micah Parsons his freshman year. Now, Micah still played a lot. But Franklin generally, not quite to the same lengths that Joe would go to not play freshmen. But if he has guys that he trusts in front of a freshman who he doesn't feel like is totally ready yet to get a bigger role, he's going to do that. He's going to opt for the older guys. So I still have full confidence Tyseer Denmark's going to be a big-time player here by the time it's all said and done.
Yeah, I missed obviously a lot of that, but Shawn, I did want to confirm, or I will confirm, that Tyseer Denmark did score a touchdown in garbage time.
Oh yeah, it's true. Yeah, like so he has gotten in, but I totally get what I think it was Tim was saying. Like, we haven't seen that there have been lots of games we haven't seen him at all, and I don't believe he got in on Saturday. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe he did. I know we didn't play the backups till really, really late. I was very afraid to see Nick Singleton get a carry later in the fourth quarter. Didn't really love that part of the game that he got another carry, but I know the backups, they may not have gotten into the very last or second to last series. Yeah, even when Gronk got in, he was in with a lot of the starters.
Yeah, they wanted to give him an opportunity with the starters still in there, which I can understand to a certain degree. But that's it for the receiver talk. I don't want to talk too much about the portal just because I don't like wishing people in there, but we will see what happens. Penn State still has a lot to play for with Boise State taking on Penn State in the Fiesta Bowl Tuesday night at 7:30. I do not have New Year's Eve off, Shawn, so I will be
Me neither.
having to work right before the game, which typically when Penn State's on, I like to have about 17 beers, roughly
what time are you out?
7 hours beforehand. I can I got to look at my schedule, but I can kind of work my schedule. I might start a little bit earlier and end a little bit earlier, kind of deal. But we'll see what kind of happens there. Let's talk about that Boise State team. By the way, before I do that, Tim Ray just says he agrees with you. Competition will be good. Light a fire under that group. So he agrees with you there. Shawn, I went back and watched the UNLV football game. I had watched some Boise State here and there, but just a quarter here, a quarter there. So I hadn't watched a ton yet of them this year. Went back and watched the whole UNLV game. Boise State fans, I think, were on Lyndon Tangwall pretty hard for just watching the UNLV game on X today. Boise State's a very interesting team because they're like the Tennessee Titans when they had Derrick Henry. Like they will do one thing and that is it. And that one thing is run the football with Austin Genty. I mean, I'm not even like exaggerating when I say the ball is going to him and you have to be ready for it. I mean, the ball just I think they gave him a stupid amount of carries against UNLV, and obviously they've given him a stupid amount of carries all year round. But it's just like they are okay with 3 yards in a cloud of dust, 3 yards in a cloud of dust, because they know and they believe that eventually Austin Genty is going to break one. And that was kind of the case against UNLV. I mean, it ended up being 21-7, but Austin Genty had 32 carries for 209 yards, 6.5 yards per carry, but he had one run for 75 yards. So, Shawn, I know we said we would not do the quick math on the show anymore, but if you just, do that quick math real quick, you're looking at 31 carries for, shoot, I just lost it, 134 yards, 209 minus 75, 134. So you got 31 divided by 134. Oh man, I set up 4.3 yards per carry. So he kind of comes back down to earth a little bit when you take out the home run balls. Now, the good news for Boise State is he always has home run balls. It's almost kind of like Saquon Barkley. Like you can't necessarily take out the home run hits if he always has a home run. So they are going to feed him to the point on which they will win or lose the game because of him. I'm okay with that. I'm very curious if they stick with that against a team maybe they're not as confident in. It's one thing to do that against the Mountain West schedule. They did lean on him pretty heavily even in the Oregon game, which they lost by 3. But I'm just curious if they're losing that game by 10, if they're losing by 14, are they willing to still stick with that? Because early on, he was getting stopped for a yard, 2 yards, minus 1 yards. Are they going to continue that even if they're down by 14 or 17 points? Which we'll talk about the defenses. That to me is what I'm gonna be very curious about. Are they willing to stick with that running game, even if it's not working early?
Well, I mean, I think that's why their defense is so important in this game, right? Because ideally, yes, I think they would just like to ride Ashton Genty until the wheels come off. But the reality of the game and how the game's going, let's say you go down early against Penn State and Genty's really not getting going yet. Not saying it's time to abandon the run super early, but eventually you're going to have that conversation where you need points. Now, do I think they'll ever abandon the run with Ashton Genty? No, they wouldn't be here without him. I was talking to my cousin at Christmas Eve, who's actually a Michigan Wolverine fan. He, I was saying it's kind of like the old heads will appreciate this. Indiana State with Larry Bird. Like Larry Bird was on Indiana State, who was not good at basketball and has not been good at basketball since Larry Bird was there. But it was just all about Larry. And eventually, play Michigan State and they lose in the title game, but they went undefeated in the regular season. So it's kind of how this Boise State team is, especially on offense. Their defense, who we'll get to, there's some things I like, some things I don't like about their defense. But on offense, yeah, it's all about Genty. And a lot of and I think ideally they would like to just give him the ball a ton, because why wouldn't you?
7.3 yards per carry.
Yeah, why wouldn't you give him the ball? a lot, especially when you're playing against your against the best opponents you'll play this year. Like you said, they fed him a ton against Oregon, and he was the reason they were in that game. They fed him a ton against, they didn't really play. I think the only other ranked team they played was UNLV, and when they played UNLV as well, heavy dose of Ashton Genty, and I think they're very comfortable with that. But a lot of this is going to depend on how the game's going.
Yeah, and again, he has. I was just curious. I had to look this up. He right now has 30 total touchdowns on a season. Monty Ball had 33. Barry Sanders had 37 in 1 year, which just kind of goes to show you how insane some of those numbers are. But wanted to mention that from just a rushing touchdown perspective, he has 29, which ties him for 6. So if he could get 2 more, he could get into 4th place. If he could somehow get 4 on Saturday, he could tie Monty Ball. So he's in that kind of realm. One thing that Dorito Bandit just brought up, his worry is tackling Austin Genty. And Shawn, it's very interesting because we talked a lot about Tony Rojas's tackling, and Franklin mentioned the shoulder in the press conference this week. Maybe it was technically at the end of the last game, but I feel like Tony Rojas has the opportunity to really turn the corner here. Like, we already knew he could do the coverage stuff. Had the nice pick. He chased down a couple plays, moving laterally side to side. But now he can kind of maybe pass the final boss, which is Austin Genty, and being able to tackle him when it matters most is going to be really important for Penn State to be successful. And it's not just Tony Rojas. It's going to be Dom DeLuca. It's going to be Kavion Keys. Kavion Keys. It's going to be Zion Tracy. I don't know why I said Kavion Keys. It'd be nice if they had Kavion Keys in this kind of game. It's going to be Zion Tracy. It's going to be Jalen Reed. It's going to be Zakee Wheatley. They're going to have to make some of these plays. And I really want to focus on the safeties and the linebackers here, because I think they're the ones that are going to have to fill the gaps internally. A lot of duo running, inside zone running by Boise State, where they just kind of block zone and let Genty find the hole. They're going to have to fill gaps correctly, and they're going to have to make some tackles, or at least hold on long enough to get back up. And I feel like, Shawn, that hasn't been Penn State's strong suit so far this season.
If Penn State were to lose this game and we're doing a review, one of the first things we'll say is we didn't tackle well enough. That is one of the ways that Boise State can win this game, is if Penn State tackles like they have at times this year. Overall, I think like when you watch a lot of college football like we do, a lot of teams don't tackle that great. They really don't, especially in today's day and age, because you don't get as much time, especially in the summer, to really work on tackling. Like, teams don't tackle the ground anymore in the summer. Really, the first time you get a hard hit is during a game, just because of the way the calendar is with the NCAA and how much time they have with you. It's harder and harder to teach tackling today. So overall, and I think you look at Penn State, I think they do a pretty good job of it. But yeah, there have been times that they haven't tackled that great. I didn't think they tackled super well in a game that if there was one mild critique in the SMU game, I think there were some times they could have tackled a little bit better. And if they don't tackle well in this game, yeah, that's one of the ways you could absolutely lose this game, because Ashton Genty could go, instead of running for 150 yards, which I think Penn State would weirdly be okay with, he runs for 250 yards, and then we're in the danger zone. So yeah, you brought up Tony Rojas. I think when you're a guy like him who has had an up and down year, you're looking to string games together. And he had, in my mind, his best game against SMU. So if he could string another good game together, like playing against the best running back in the country, and then you're going into either playing Notre Dame or Georgia, where, again, you're going to have to tackle really well. You're going to have to fill gaps really well, because both those teams could run the ball. Yeah, you'd be feeling really, really good about yourself. And announcement that we got, I think since our last pod, was Zachy Wheatley is coming back next year, which is a good sign. And yeah, I think he's gotten better as a tackler.
He had
But
2 tackles, touchdown-saving tackles against SMU. Now, would it have really made a difference in the game? Maybe, maybe not. But twice the receiver had some momentum, had just made somebody miss, and it just kind of felt like one of those plays where they were going to get in the end zone, and Zachy Wheatley stood him up, and eventually SMU didn't score on those drives. So he saved 2 touchdowns on 2 different drives, and so I was very impressed. I want to give him a little shout out there.
And he prevented the touchdown to the tight end. Got beat initially, but then was able to recover and break the pass up. So that was a big play in the game. So yeah, your point's a good one. That it's gonna be it is really on the linebackers and safeties. Of course, the defensive line, but I think the defensive line will be fine. But the linebackers and safeties have to continue to play at the high level that they played at against SMU.
Yeah, Tim Ray says people are going to talk about Boise State's offensive line, but when you face 11 Nevadas, it could be inflated. They are statistically one of the worst tackling teams. We'll talk about defense more in a second. Brandon Voco on X says Zane Durant legacy game. I bring that up and shout out to Brandon because the offensive coordinator for Boise State today was talking about how impressed he was with Zane Durant. And if he was Zane Durant's agent, it would be one of the easiest jobs in the country. So a lot of love for Zane Durant coming from Boise State there. I think the defensive line is going to be fine. I think they're going to put Penn State in really good situations. I talked about this on his last episode, like how important you earn the right to rush the passer. And it is going to be inflamed more this week. You want to rush the passer, you want to get a couple sacks, you want to, force Boise State into some mistakes. You are truly going to earn that this week if you can stop Austin Genty on 1st and 2nd down. I mean, there's no bigger reward than stopping Austin Genty than making this Boise State pass offense throw the football through the air. Madsen is a quarterback, which almost sounds like a porno name. But Madsen is not a bad quarterback. He's got 22 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, so he's taking care of the football pretty well. He's only been sacked 10 times. Overall, Boise State is top 10 in the country in sacks allowed. It's at 12. Obviously, they don't throw the ball a ton or sit back really in long passing situations. A lot of dinking and dunking, get the ball out fast. But I also wanted to mention Madsen is a capable runner. He had a touchdown in the UNLV game. He has 5 on the year. He will pull it and has some wiggle to him. So it's not I can only focus on Austin Genty kind of thing. They are going to have to at least pay attention to Madsen. And I do want to just finish the running conversation by saying Genty does not come out of the game very much. There's not really they got some other backup running backs and fullbacks that have 20-something carries, but Austin Genty is going to be out there the entire time for the most part. Don't expect him to be pulled. Don't worry about a backup. Don't worry about a 3rd down back. It is going to be the Genty show. And again, Madsen has some wiggle to him if he needs to, but not a lethal runner, but a runner that can kind of be a thorn in your side if you let him.
Yeah, has done a good job taking care of the ball too. And I think when you have a guy like Genty in the backfield, when you're the quarterback, the big thing is just don't mess things up. And he does a good job of that, only 3 interceptions on the year. And then we play, it's also important to point out they have a receiver who had almost 1,000 yards receiving this year too in Cam Camper, who Penn State fans should, if you think you know that name, you do. I'm
glad I brought him up.
Played for the Indiana Hoosiers under Coach Tom Allen. So, having a statistically his best year with Boise. So, like I said, 837 yards, has 4 touchdowns, and he's getting 15 yards a catch. So, big target, good red zone threat as well.
Shawn, the only thing I wasn't able to get, and I just want to go back to Ashton Genty real quick. I I think he's taking care of the football really well as well. I wasn't able to get the number. I was trying to get true fumbles lost, like regardless of. Yeah, I don't think he has any this year. But in fact, I was looking at his career stats here. Ashton Genty doesn't have a single fumble in his career. So if there's one additional thing to take note of, he also doesn't fumble the football, which is just, I mean, quick math here, approximately 700 carries in his career, not seeing any fumbles lost, which is just insane.
I guess he's due for one.
You would argue, statistics would say Ashton Genty is going to fumble it on Saturday. But Cam Kemper's a good point. He tore his ACL right before Penn State played them a couple of years ago. And I remember you and I talking about it, and we're like, this is a pretty big deal for Cam Kemper to be out. He's not an elite wide receiver. He's not a Jeremiah Smith, but he's a guy that can make you hurt if you let him.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, and I think a lot of teams have tried to crowd the box to stop their run. I think Penn State's going to do a lot of that on Saturday as well. We run a 4-2-5. I think you're going to see this. I think you're going to see the Lion play in a lot. But the thing is, when you do that, you do leave yourself vulnerable for the pass, and the best offenses are able to take advantage of when a team cheats up like that, even especially when you're going against a guy and a running back and just a run game in general, because you have to give credit to that offensive line too, like Boise's. So yeah, I mean, if you do I think we'll be all right? I do. I think AJ Harris is more than up to the challenge to go up against Cam Camper, but they're gonna have to keep their head on a swivel a little bit out there.
Yeah, and then the other guy I wanted to mention too that kind of seems like the safety blanket for Boise State is Matt Lauder, the tight end. Second on the team in reception, 43 receptions, 523 yards. Leads the team in touchdown receptions with 6, and just seems to be kind of, and I'm going to say this very loosely, but seems to be like the Tyler Warren for this Boise State team as far as if you need to move the sticks, he's the guy you're going to. I'm not saying he's Tyler Warren as far as talent goes or anything like that, but as far as you need something in the passing game, you're going to go to Matt Lautner because you feel like he can get you what you need. So pay attention to him. He just seemed to continue to show up there, number 85 for Boise State.
Yep, no doubt. Yeah, so again, it all kind of stems from Genty, but I think all the guys we went over shows they're a little more balanced than we think. Like, this team really wouldn't be that great if they had zero threat in the passing game.
Right.
They would not have, even with having Ashton Genty as your running back, they'd probably go like 8-4 in the Mountain West, and nobody would know who any of these people are.
Right. Yeah, I mean, they are going to run the rock, but they have done enough in the passing game to be effective. And I think that does matter. And again, they're just limiting their mistakes, right? Like, I think at the end of the day, they are playing we're going to run the football and take care of the football, and whatever happens kind of happens. They're not going to do anything crazy, but they're also just going to kind of stick to who they are, which I think makes it a very interesting matchup because in a sense, that's very similar to what Penn State does. Penn State, besides the SMU game, not really known for getting a bunch of turnovers. More about taking care of the football, kind of just doing what they need to do to win. And again, Boise State, number 2 in the country in total turnovers and giveaways, sitting there with only 8 on the year. It's kind of funny because if you look at some of the playoff teams that made it this year, Clemson, Indiana, Boise State, Arizona State, all in the kind of top 10, top 15 area as far as teams that, took care of the football and didn't lose it very much. Now, they don't get a lot of turnovers, but I think it just kind of goes to show you that they're not going to beat themselves up. The third down conversion percentage, very high. because they're in very manageable situations. Their tackles for loss allowed, their sacks allowed, very low, because again, they're not putting themselves in position to be off schedule where they can't give the ball to Ashton Genty. They are totally okay with 3 yards in a cloud of dust, because that means they're sitting at a 3rd and 3, and that means they can give the ball to their big and also powerful and speedy back. And that's one last thing I guess I'll mention on this is I am nervous in a sense of selling out to stop the run. How much do you go from, a typical defense where you got your D-line, your linebackers, and your safeties, when you start selling out a little bit to stop the run, how much does it go to 3 levels to just 1 level? And if he breaks it, he's 88 and out the gate, which we saw in a couple games this year. And that's one concern I do have is this defense from time to time is overly aggressive, maybe not with the play calling, but with the personnel. And I am nervous that Boise State's going to be very methodical and very patient with the football. And sometimes this defense, especially the defensive line, Abdul Carter, denied Dennis Sutton, I think is a little bit better as far as being patient and staying home and whatnot. But Carter, the Rojas's of the world, are they going to be okay with a 2-yard stop or a 3-yard stop? And are they okay playing Boise State's game on a 3rd and 3, a 3rd and 2, a 3rd and 4, and not having as many opportunities to rush the passer to have that big kind of spark play?
Yeah. Like you think back to the Bowling Green game, one of the big problems that we had early was too many guys were trying to play hero ball. Too many guys were out of their gaps, and Bowling Green burned us. And Boise State is much, much better than Bowling Green. And if you fall way behind on them, I don't know if you're coming back in this game or not. So you can't really do that. You just have to kind of play within the system. Even though Cory and I do have some issues with the system, it does work, and you have to trust it. And if you do, I mean, you should have, even with how good Genty is, you should have a lot of success on defense. I think, you look across the board, we have a ton of talent. This is a top 10 defense in the country, and we're going up against a team from the Mount West. So on paper, we should be fine. But it's about executing. On paper, we shouldn't give up 24 points in 1/2 to Bowling Green, but we did. So really, it's about going out and taking care of business for ourselves.
Yeah, I just want to pause in the action for a second, just let everyone know that Rutgers is currently up 34-17 on Kansas State. People are beginning to wonder whether or not Rutgers would win the Big 12. People are asking that question.
People are saying.
Tim Ray mentions, you got to worry about Ashton Genty in the passing game as well. And I think so. I think, they are going to get him at least 35, 40 touches in this football game. One guy, Shawn, we haven't mentioned is Kobe King. I mean, this is like, first of all, Kobe King is thick with 2 C's. Like, I don't remember him looking that thick, but all of a sudden, like in the SMU game, he was not bad big. I mean, good big. This is a matchup that you love if you're a middle linebacker. This is like you versus me in the hole. Let's see who wins. This is like a Brandon Bell, Glenn Carson type matchup here. They would love the opportunity to go up against an Ashton Genty in the hole 1-on-1. So hopefully Kobe King is as excited about that and is gonna, because you could realistically say if Kobe King has a good day, Penn State's gonna win this game easily.
And I think that should make you feel pretty good if you're a Penn State fan, really, if you put it that simply. Because has Kobe King had a bad game yet this year? Really, last 2 years? I don't think so. I think you'd have to go back to like Michigan 2022 to point out the last bad game Kobe King had. He is as solid a middle linebacker, and this is high praise that Penn State has had. Just consistently game in, game out, going out, getting his 8 to 12 tackles and going home and just not really making mistakes. The stat nerds love him. PFF, like he is always like top 5 graded in the conference every single week. And you watch him, and he's just so fundamentally sound. He's where he's supposed to be at all times. And whenever we go back, and if there's if we give up a big gain in the run game, it seems like it's never Kobe King's fault. It's never Kobe King filling the wrong hole. It's other people filling the wrong hole. It's other people playing hero ball. It's never Kobe King, ever. So, yes, I think you feel really, really good about having him in the middle of the defense going up against the best back in the country. I mean, if I had a vote, and we don't, I would have voted for Shawn to win the Heisman. And I'm so happy we're riding with Kobe King in a game like this.
Absolutely. Hey, before we start talking about the Boise State defense versus Penn State's offense, I'm just going to give you my quick red zone conversion percentages that I care so much about. Penn State right now, after that game against SMU, is allowing touchdowns in the red zone 41% of the time. That is now second best in the country behind only Ohio State, who's at 37.5%. So second best in the country. If you were curious, Boise State sits at 39. They allow a touchdown in the red zone 55% of the time. So we're talking about a 14% difference as far as touchdowns allowed in the red zone. That is quite significant. And then if you flip it around as far as how good these offenses are in the red zone, as far as touchdown percentage goes, not surprising to anybody, Boise State's one of the best teams at scoring in the red zone because guess what? They can run the football. They are scoring touchdowns in the red zone 77% of the time. That is top 5 behind Indiana, Navy, Alabama, and Ohio State. Penn State's sitting there at 21 at 72%. So about a 5% difference there. But again, that kind of just stems back to being able to run the football. And to me, Shawn, that's a kind of a immovable object meets unstoppable force kind of moment there. If Boise State is scoring touchdowns in the red zone 77% of the time, and Penn State's only allowing touchdowns in the red zone 42% of the time, something's going to have to give there. And you could argue 1 or 2 field goals in the red zone for Boise State might be the nail in the coffin. If Boise State's able to get in the end zone on all of their red zone attempts, might have ourselves a pretty big rock fight.
Yeah. Last game, one of the reasons I felt so good about the Penn State SMU game was SMU wasn't that awesome in the red zone. Just the way they're built, they're just going to spread you out. And that should theoretically work until about the 20-yard line. But then when that field gets smaller, not guaranteed to work. Right. Cool thing about Boise's offense, not so cool for us, but for them, is their style works from their 1-yard line all the way to our 1-yard line. So you could really do that wherever. And really, I think, you brought up keeping them wanting to be on schedule before, and I think that's so true.
Right. I like when you say I'm smart.
I'll give you that. This one. But when you think about having a guy like this getting those 3 yards, getting those 4 yards, I mean, we're gonna have to try to stone these guys a couple times. And instead of a 3 or 4 yard gain, a 1-yard gain. And I know we just talked about how important it is to stay in your gap, but a guy like Zane Durant winning at the point of attack, a guy like Devon J. Thomas winning at the point of attack, that's going to be so big for us to let those linebackers eat a little bit and keeping them in the 3rd and 8s where really you're not going to be able to run Jeanty out of the backfield.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what the game comes down to, whether it's red zone. It comes down to, and Penn State did really good on first down against SMU. Completely different beast. I mean, again, SMU's running back was not even a running back to start his college career. He's a receiver. You're going from that to Ashton Jeanty. Like, that is a pretty big difference as far as vision and power and speed. It's a different animal. But again, I think the recipe is almost the same. If you can stop them on first down, make them a little bit more one-dimensional, you got yourselves a good chance. It's going to be a lot harder with SMU as far as stopping them, as well as I don't think Boise State's going to be. I think they're going to be more stubborn about sticking with it than SMU was as well. So I'm curious about that. Shawn, you want to flip over to Boise State's defense, or we can just talk about Ashton Jeanty for the rest of the show?
Yeah, let's talk about their defense. I feel a little happier when I talk about their defense.
The last thing I'll say is Ashton Jeanty was on Zoom today. I wasn't aware of the elbow injury, but I guess his elbow is completely healed, so that's good for the Broncos. He said that the front seven is elite. He said there's great linebackers, great defensive line, and said that as far as being the underdog, says we've already proved people wrong, but we still have that chip on our shoulder. So that's all three things not great for Penn State. But yeah, let's flip over and talk about the Boise State defense. First of all, a lot of people are going to look at the stats and say, look, just pass the ball. And I don't think they're necessarily wrong. Boise State fans on X today were talking about how that their DBs are the weakness, which if you ask Penn State, you'd be like, I'd rather wish your linebackers and defensive line are the weakness because they'd rather run the ball. Front seven's a little bit better for Boise State. However, I will just say, like, I don't think the Boise State rush defense is as good as SMU's. So I'm not saying they're going to have some success through the air. I'm not saying they're not going to have success through the air, but I do think they're going to be able to run the ball better for two reasons. One, it's going to be in a dome. And two, I don't think Boise State's defensive line's as good as SMU's. So I think they're going to have some success there, but they also should have more success through the air because it's in a dome. Drew Allar's better in a dome, and also the Boise State secondary is susceptible to passes over the top.
Yeah. I mean, they are not good against the pass. I mean, the one thing though that they try to counteract that is sacking the quarterback. They have 51 sacks this year. Right. So yeah, there are things that, because I know when you look at what they've done this year on defense, they give up a lot. They gave up a lot of points, especially earlier in the year. That the past few games, their defense played better. But they gave up over 40 points to Georgia Southern. So they give up a lot. So they have given up some points this year. But I think if we're living in a world where Boise State wins, Drew Aller is not going to have a lot of time to throw, and maybe forces Penn State into some mistakes, forces us into some third and longs that we're not able to pick up. So to me, they're probably going to be aggressive because they're going to know, all right, well, we're not going to have an answer for Tyler Warren. May not have an answer for Harrison Wallace either. So kind of just go for broke and try to sack Drew Aller, because I think that's their best hope in slowing down our passing game, is maybe try to attack Nolan Rucci, who has played well, but that's probably their best course of action in my view. And then just keep Penn State's defense off the field. That would be nice too for them. Penn State's offense off the field.
What's one thing interesting about the sacks is if you look at Penn State sacks, they have 8 sacks on the road or at a neutral site all year. 8. They have 28 sacks at home. When you look at Boise State, they are even. 26 sacks at home and 25 sacks on the road or a neutral site. So I don't know if that means anything, but I do think it's interesting that Penn State's is that discrepancy is so large. What's happening at home versus away? Is it really the snap count? And we talk about that a lot as far as having to go to a more predictable snap count because you can't hear when you're on the road. But it doesn't seem to affect Boise State at all. And maybe that, again, because of the different environments they're playing in versus Penn State. Maybe it has to do with some of the jumping off sides early on. They got a little bit less aggressive. But there's a big discrepancy there, and Boise State doesn't seem to have a problem with it. Doesn't matter where they play. They seem to be able to get after the passer. And so, the other thing to keep in mind, too, is UNLV's also has a bunch of sacks this year, and they obviously play in the same conference. So I do wonder, as far as the level of talent, as far as the offensive lines they're going against, and what that means when, you have two teams in the top four from the same conference. Makes you kind of wonder a little bit as far as how much offensive line plays in there, how much they're throwing the rock. But also in Boise State's case, they're up in a lot of these games, which means teams are going to have to pin their ears back, or excuse me, they're going to have to throw the ball, which allows Boise State to pin their ears back and go after them. So, like, I remember a couple of years, like, the Patriots were always having a bunch of sacks in games. And like, oh, how are they getting so many stacks in them? But when it came to like really meaningful games, they weren't necessarily having as much success rushing the passer. A lot of that was because these teams are coming from behind, and that was allowing those Patriot defenders to tee off. And I think some of that is existing too, which again, just kind of goes back to, we said this with SMU, but I'm going to say it again. One of the most important parts of this game is get the lead and keep the lead. Because if you get the lead and keep the lead, it prevents those Boise State players from teeing off on Drew Aller, and it also helps you on the other side of things with Ashton Genty. So I think it's a really good point to bring up, Shawn. You can't find yourself in situations where you're allowing this pass rush multiple opportunities to come after you.
Yeah, I think when you're comparing and contrasting them in SMU, even on Saturday, I didn't think they were going to come back against us. They didn't. But the Clemson game was back of my head. It is even more crucial for Boise not to fall behind against Penn State, because Boise is not really built to come back. And I think it's more so, I don't think their defense is capable of, their offense could score. I mean, they have Genty, they could score at any time. But I don't think their defense is capable of just preventing us from scoring to when we're already sitting on a lead. So yeah, I think getting up early on these guys, that's critical. Because if we on the flip side fall behind, well, they're built to keep a lead. It's kind of like when you play Army or Navy in a way. Once you get up on Army and Navy, you kind of know, all right, you're good. But if they're up on you,
that's one of the worst feelings in the world.
Yeah, because they're just going to triple option you to death. You're going to get the ball like 2 or 3 more times. If you're in the middle of the third quarter, you're like, all right, I'm probably going to get the ball like 2 or 3 more times, and I am 2 possessions down. So kind of sad day for you then. And
right.
Penn State cannot find itself in that kind of hole.
I absolutely agree. Tim Ray on YouTube has a point. He says, yes, Drew Aller will thrive in a dome environment. Penn State won't want to admit this, but the cold affected him too. This is a very comfortable environment for him. And yeah, you go back and look at some of Drew Aller's best games. I mean, I wouldn't say he necessarily had a great game. Statistically, it was okay against Ole Miss, but Michigan State, the Big Ten championship, there's been games where Drew Aller looks a lot more comfortable when he's able to be in a dome in not just cold environments, but no wind environments. And I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, like dome games, and then 2 of his best games both came against West Virginia, where it was
early.
Yeah, it was early in the year, and I know we had the big rain delay against West Virginia this year, but it wasn't raining during the game.
Yeah.
It was pretty sunny the whole rest of the game, and then it was a clear night when they first played West Virginia too. Also, West Virginia's defense isn't any good, but we've played against defenses that weren't any good, and Drew didn't have such great games.
Right. Shawn, I want to mention some guys on here. One guy that I love, like I just think he's fantastic, is Oladipo, their safety. 6.5 sacks from the safety position. I think that's the most for a safety right now in college football. He's all over the damn place. I don't want to say he's almost like a Jaquan Brisker type player where he's around the line of scrimmage a lot. and he's going to terrorize you. He's the second leading tackler on the team. He's going to be around the football, and I really liked watching him play. So Oladipo is one guy I wanted to mention. The other safety, Benefield, Ty Benefield. He's their leading tackler with 73. He also has 2 picks. I mean, those 2 safeties are really good. I think maybe the corners aren't as good, but I don't think the problem is the safeties. I really like the 2 safeties there in Benefield and Oladipo, so I wanted to mention those 2 guys. I think they're really fun to watch on the highlights I watch, but also the full UNLV game I watch.
Yeah, and then I mean between their 2 starting edge guys, they have 18.5 sacks in
That's a problem.
and then Virgin Morgan, they have 18.5 sacks. So like I don't know how many Abdul Carter and Dennis Sutton have between the 2 of them. It's probably right in that neighborhood. But man, that is some impressive stuff, and they're not the only ones that get after quarterback. Like you said, Oladipo stands out. Defensive tackle Feely also contributes with 5.5 sacks. So they
combined. Abdul Carter and Dennis Sutton have 16.5.
Yeah, so they have more than Abdul Carter and Dennis Sutton combined, just for reference. So yeah, this pass rush is for real. Like Cory said, consider them and UNLV both sacked the quarterback a ton. It may say more about the Mount West than it may say a little bit more about the Mount West than it does about Boise. But Boise, I mean, this is not a pass rush that should be fooled around with. I thought a couple times against SMU, we didn't protect Drew as well as we did, not nearly as well as we did against Oregon. So you're playing against a team in Boise State who, while I think SMU is better against the run, Boise's better as a pass rushing defense. They have a better pass rush. So keeping Drew's uniform clean. If Penn State's able to do that, I think we'll be all right in this one.
You know, the other thing to say about that too is, like, the offensive line I think has done a lot better this year as far as diagnosing twists and stunts and figuring out where the pressure is coming from. I think that's going to be a big part of Saturday. Like, Oladipo lines up all over the place. Identifying where he is and where he might be blitzing from is going to be crucial to Penn State's success. A couple times in the SMU game, they got confused. I mean, they didn't have a great day throwing the football, and they didn't have a great day protecting Drew Aller. I think some of it was on Drew Aller where he held on to it too long, but there was a couple times where they had some misassignments. So they're gonna be tested in that regard as far as protecting Drew Aller from maybe some uncharacteristic or diverse blitz packages. I'll just mention the yards per attempt. Boise State's sitting there at 7.5 yards per attempt allowed, which is a whole yard more than SMU. And we didn't think SMU's pass defense was necessarily that great either. So, again, things are pointing towards Penn State being able to air out the football if they're able to. Penn State's still 12th in the country at 8.6 yards per attempt in passing. So, still have the ability to do so. But the final thing I'll say, as much as I like Benefield, as much as I like Oladipo, I think Landon Tangwall said this, don't really have anyone to match up with Tyler Warren. I think they're going to struggle with that. I wanted to mention that since I think we previewed SMU without mentioning Tyler Warren. So I wanted to make sure we mentioned Tyler Warren on this one. Had a quiet game against SMU. And again, I think it's kind of 2 things, Shawn. You can maybe figure out a way to bracket him, cover him up and whatnot, but then you are giving basically everyone else on Penn State's team a chance to make a play, because it is going to take 2.5 guys to cover Tyler Warren, which is going to give opportunities or completely take away any sort of room for error you may have for the rest of the team. One missed tackle, touchdown, when you choose to go that route. So curious how they decide to defend it. Curious if they try to take away Tyler Warren. Curious if they, try to play straight up. Very curious what Boise State's defense is what their plan is gonna be on Saturday or Tuesday.
Yeah, I thought SMU did second best job that we played this year at containing Tyler Warren, only behind the Buckeyes. So I'm thinking he may be, may have a hankering for a big game here. I know Tyler's a pretty quiet, humble guy, but I'm sure my man, even though he'd deny it till the cows come home, he wants to show people what he's got. He is a competitor, and I think he's in for a big day Saturday. I really do. Because like you said, I just don't think there's anybody on Boise that could really hang with him.
All right, Shawn, before we get into our predictions, is there anything else you'd like to mention about this Boise State football team?
No, I think we're ready for predictions.
I'll quickly just say, let me just show, if I can, real quick here, the stats for kicking. If you were curious, I will read off those for you. Obviously, it's in a domed environment, so you would expect it to be a little bit better in that regard. Let's see if I can go to field goals here, and 13 for 16 on the year, and I'm not seeing a long attempt on here for some reason. But 13 for 16, most importantly, perfect at home, but 70% on the road or neutral site. So take that for what you will. That's Jonah Dalmas there. And then if you go to punting, not that Boise State does very much of it. Oops. Give me a second on that, Shawn. But I don't expect. Well, we talked about it in the before the SMU preview that the SMU might not punt it very much. They really didn't end up punting it very much. We kind of spot on with that one.
Yeah.
All right, 1 second here. Trying to pull up punting. And I'm struggling.
Oh, let's see what I can find too.
Here we go. All right, punting. 39 punts, average of 43 yards per punt. I am not given touchbacks, though. They punted 8 times against Oregon. And believe it or not, they punted 7 times against UNLV in the Mountain West Championship game. And in the first showing, they punted 4 times against UNLV. So, all in all, pretty decent. But again, lots of punts and not so good in kicking field goals in their games on the road and on neutral sites. So take that for what you will.
Also wanted to mention too, interesting.
Yeah.
Their offensive coordinator, Dirk Cutter, former Tampa Bay Buccaneers coach.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing, Shawn?
I mean, he wasn't very good with the Buccaneers, but I was just pointing out, yeah, long history in the NFL. So, just an interesting little tidbit for you.
Before we get to the predictions, can I just gloat for a second? Am I allowed to gloat?
As long as I can preface it with Cory picked USC and Wisconsin to beat Penn State before the season started.
Appreciate that. Thank you for reminding people.
I did not. I picked Penn State to go 11-1.
My bold prediction, completely spot on. 3 forced turnovers in the Penn State SMU game. I forgot to mention, I was looking at my notes today, and I was like, previous quarter is pretty smart.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I mean, I know you feel 10 out of 10 about this prediction, so I hope
that's right.
I hope it's for the Nittany Lions.
Yeah. Now, to be clear, I'm 10 out of 10 on my prediction, not so much my bold prediction.
Yes. Yeah. Bold prediction. I feel like we might get one right every year. So
awesome. Well, let's get into it, guys. Drop your predictions in the chat if you're watching live on YouTube. If you have a bold prediction, I love just hearing bold predictions. Make sure they're extra bold this week. But Shawn, are you ready to get into our picks?
Let's do it.
Right,
I think you go first.
Yeah, I think I do go first. So I shall do that. All right. Very confident about how this game's going to go. Very confident. I think SMU is a better football team than Boise State. And although I think Boise State has the best player in the country, I don't think everyone else around him is that good. And I think Penn State is very focused, want to know an approach. I think they are really taking that. And I think they do see the opportunity in front of them. More importantly, I love Drew Aller in a dome. I love Drew Aller going up against this Boise State pass defense. I am not worried about how the offense looked against SMU. I think they're going to resort back to more of what we saw against Oregon in the Big Ten championship. And something about getting 3 turnovers against SMU, I really think that's a contagious kind of thing. I think it's something that once you start getting a couple, everything just starts falling for you, so to speak. It's very much like shooting threes. If you get hot, I feel like you can stay hot. And so I think this defense is going to continue to flourish. And I think they're going to be able to find a way to prevent Ashton Genty from doing too much damage. Which is obviously really hard. But the best way to do that is to get a lead and keep the lead. And I think Penn State's going to do that. I have Penn State winning 38-10. And I have them keeping Ashton Genty from the all-time rushing record. I think they keep him under 130-something yards that he needs. And Penn State wins 38-10. And that's my bold prediction, is that they prevent that record from happening.
All right. Both teams are undefeated in the Fiesta Bowl, which is pretty crazy to think for few reasons. Number one, Boise State's not a Power 4 team, and they're still undefeated in a used to be BCS Bowl. I just kind of call them major bowls because it's just kind of covers the time frame of the whole history of the Fiesta Bowl. It's always been going back 40 some years now. It's been a bigger one. So take that into account. They had a lot of magic out there against Oklahoma all those years ago now, beating them. And Penn State's also undefeated in the Fiesta Bowl. A lot of great moments, shutting down Marcus Allen against USC, obviously winning the national championship. And then in our lifetime, played a young Ricky Williams with the Texas Longhorns, and then beat a pretty solid Washington team out there as well. So you look at the history. I think both teams. The funny thing, you can't take a whole lot from it, but it's just one of those things that kind of just makes you laugh a little bit. But this is about the 2024 Penn State and Boise State teams. I think Penn State has the matchup advantage pretty much across the board, outside of Ashton Genty being the best player on the field, which always gives you kind of maybe a little bit of a mental edge. Having the best player, it's a team game still. Ashton Genty's still only going to be. Funny thing about football is your best player is only on the field half the game, and that's going to be what it'll be Saturday. I am not, although they do a good job getting after the quarterback. I'm not very impressed by Boise State's defense. I think Penn State's going to have a big day offensively. I am going to pick Penn State. I am going to pick Penn State to win by a score of 41-20.
And your bold prediction, Shawn?
Bold prediction, I'll say both. I'll say that Drew Aller throws for over 300 yards.
There you have it. I did look up the record while you're giving your prediction. Genty needs 132. So have me down for 131.
All right. That's just cruel.
I just, I love, Shawn, you're so good at coming up with these lines, like your best player only being on the field for half of the game. Like that to me is the perfect way of summing up this football game. And unfortunately for Boise State, your best players are running back. And yes, like you said with Navy, those type of teams where if you're in the game, you can really lean on them and it can become demoralizing for the other team. But in a game where you're not as confident with your defense and you find yourself down, you can't run the ball at a certain point. I mean, if you get down 17 early, I'm sure you probably stick with it. You can't just, throw it every time. But even then, you're going to cut into how many carries you can give him. Like, let's say you plan to give him 20 carries in the first half and you're down 10 or 17, you probably only end up giving him 15. And what we talked about with Genty isn't so much he's not getting 4 yards a clip every time. He's getting 1, he's getting 2, then he breaks a 70. Well, if you only give him 15 carries instead of 20 carries in the first half, you might have missed that one carry that was going to go for 75 yards. And so I think the best way to limit Genty is kind of what you're getting at, keeping him off the field. And, it's a great way. We've seen that strategy from the end of time, whether that's with Tom Brady or with Saquon Barkley. That's a good strategy. And again, as a running back, you can either do that by milking the clock when your team's on offense, or you can just do it by scoring touchdowns and limiting how much he can be used. So I love that line as far as your best player is only on the field half the time, because you're right. He's not out there rushing Drew Aller. He's not out there stopping Nick Singleton or Katron Allen, who we did not talk about very much in this episode. Which, by the way, both of them I think are like at this point averaging 190 something yards together in the last 2 games. Like, they're crushing it. He's not out there to stop them. And so it's going to be very interesting. And I feel bad for him because I think he is a really talented player. Like I said, I think he's the best player in the country. But there are 21 other players out in the field, and I feel strongly that Penn State, like you said, wins most of those one-on-ones.
Yeah, because while he's the best player, I mean, we probably have how many of the next 8 or 9, So yeah, I mean, talent advantage. Whenever you're team like Penn State, who's upper echelon in the Big Ten. I mean, we were in the Big Ten title game this year, playing against a team that's still a mid-major. I mean, they're a little bit better than a mid-major. I think that's because they would definitely beat a lot of Power 4 teams. They would beat, like, for example, all the teams that played today, they would beat them. They would beat a Pitt. They would beat a Rutgers and probably not have much trouble doing it. But there's still that talent gap, especially when you're playing against the better teams like Penn State. And I think at the end of the day, talent's going to win it over.
Yeah, I agree with all that, Shawn. So hopefully we are not eating a bunch of crow come Tuesday night. Shawn, we will not be. Geez, I can't even talk anymore. We will not be back until the new year. So I just want to say, a fantastic year with you here at State Media, Hardcore Penn State Football. We have not figured out, I think it's probably roughly maybe going to be a week. We'll just call it maybe Thursday. Assume New Year's Day, we're going to be probably a little bit busy. So let's just call it, we'll be back next Thursday.
Well, I mean, it's hard for me to tell right now, Cory, because it's not going to be till next year.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate everyone being so lively in the chat. We have Dorito Bandit going 35-17 with a bold prediction of Trey Wallace and Julian Fleming catching touchdowns. We have Wyatt going 34-20 with Ashton Genty getting 100 yards, but they still win and Penn State still wins and covers. So appreciate you guys being alive in the YouTube chat this evening. We'll be back in 1 week to break this down. Penn State again taking on Boise State 7:30 on New Year's Eve. We'll be back Thursday to recap it. Until then, you guys have a fantastic rest of your week and a great weekend. Thank you guys so much for being here and having such a great year with us. We will be back in 2025. For Shawn, Kane, I'm Cory Lestochi. You've been listening to Hardcore Penn State Football. Until next year,